Hey guys, it's Upa here. So today I want to talk about gearing, the basic mechanics behind gearing, and also some tips and tricks of how you can gear optimally to build your characters well. So let's talk about gear sets first. So there are very basic gear sets, such as giving individual stats like HP, speed, and leech, and there are also more advanced skill sets which give a combination of different buffs. So these special gear sets can be seen in the workshop, and what you will notice is that there are a whole bunch of different gear sets, and these gear sets are listed based on the order in which they have been released. So the most recent gear sets are found at the top and the older ones are at the bottom. So you will also notice that based on how old these gear sets are, they do use different kinds of ingots that are used to craft these gears. So for instance, the older ones uses these green ingots, and we also have these brown ingots, these blue ingots, these red ones, and finally these new purple ones. So generally the rule of thumb is that the more recent gear sets are stronger than the older ones, but this isn't a very hard and definitive rule, and there are exceptions, and also it's very dependent on the character you are trying to build and the stats you need. So one major exception I would say is the devouring set is still generally the best gear set that you can use on your damage dealing characters, even though we do have the more recent bone erosion and fast killing set, which are also strong for damage dealers but not as strong as the devouring set. So now let's take a look at equipment star levels and rarities. So let's talk about star level first, and we can hopefully find some different star gears. So you can see for star level is important because it affects the main stat and the substat values of your gear. So for instance, you can see that in this speed gear, if I were to max it out, so let's go to our speed, and we should scroll all the way to the bottom to find our 1-star gear. And you can see that as you progress in the game, you really won't be keeping any low star gear, but I got these from campaign drops. So let's take a look at these boots for instance. So for these boots at level 16, you will see that I only have 36 speed. And let's take a look at one of the random stats such as HP rate. So HP rate is 1.4%. So let's remember these numbers. At 1 star and plus 16, we get a total of 36 speed and 1.4%. So now let's take a look at these 3-star boots instead and bring them to level 16 as well. So you can see that for the speed at level 16, because this gear is at a higher star rating, you can see that our speed is 108 as compared to 36 here. So let's see if there's any comparable stats that we can refer to. So unfortunately, there's no identical substat in any of these, but it's worth mentioning that the base value of these substats are also dependent on the star level, similar to the main stat. So what that means is for this 1-star gear, you can see that this HP rate is 1.4%, and across different 1-star gears, this value may vary slightly. So maybe you have another 1-star gear which has maybe 1.0% HP rate, and maybe you have another 1-star gear which has perhaps 2% HP rate, but it still varies within a small range. And compared to a higher star boots, the base value of your substats will still be higher. So maybe for a 3-star gear, this value could be 3% at base value and fluctuate between perhaps 2.5% to 3.5%. So I don't have the exact values, but the main thing that you need to take away from this is that the star values are very important because it affects the base value of your stats as well as the main value of your stats. So right here we can see once again for 3-star boots, and for 3-star boots we have speed plus 108, and if we go to the top and we look at some 6-star boots, the rarity is irrelevant. So at 6-star boots we see that we have a base 216 speed, and if we can find perhaps a piece with HP rate such as this. So if you recall, the 1-star gear had a 1-point-something% HP rate, and you can see that the base value of these 6-star pieces is 6.3% HP rate. So there's a very significant increase in the value of the stats based on the star level. And so I recall the 3-star gear boots at level 16 was 100 speed, and what you can see is that on a level 16 6-star boots, the base speed is 216. So this is how the star level works, and star level is definitely the most important part of the gear because it affects your mean stats and your substat values significantly. So now let's talk about rarity. So let's take a look at these legendary boots first. So the concepts of rarity and star levels are independent of each other. So you should not try and mix them up and complicate how each of them work. So for rarity, you can see that at level 0, these boots have 4 stats already predetermined, right? And if we take a look at a lower rarity, so for instance epic, and it doesn't matter the gear type, you can see that I only have 3 stats predetermined. And now if we look for elite gear, you will see that we only have 2 stats predetermined. If we have a rare gear, there's only 1 stat predetermined, and if there's a common gear, there's 0 stats predetermined. So this is all at level 0. So the rarity of the item affects the amount of predetermined stats. So why is this important? Well, every time you enhance a piece of gear, so let's take this piece for instance, and every time we enhance a piece of gear, it will increase one of your substats, and this is based on the level that you increase it to. So at level 4, if you have at least 1 predetermined stat, it will raise one of the substats accordingly. And you can see that for every 4 levels, it will increase a random stat. So in this case, I got a +1 in each gear piece, but this is not necessarily guaranteed. So you can see that I have another piece where I have +4 in mastery and +1 in speed. So it's random in terms of which substat will be boosted every time you level a gear piece by 4. So you can see that for legendary gear, since we have 4 pre-existing substats, when we level it to 16, we get 4 additional buffs. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. And just to show you another example, if we raise this to level 16, we still have another 4 additional buffs. So 1, 2, and then +2, which will be 4. So how does this compare to an epic gear piece? So let's take a look. And okay, so let's take a look at some boots as well. Although, like I mentioned, the gear piece is irrelevant. So for this epic gear piece, we have 3 predetermined stats. So for the first 3 upgrades, so at level 4, level 8, and level 12, everything will seem the same. And we have gotten 1 additional substat bonus per 4 levels, which is the same as a legendary piece. But what you will see is that when we enhance to level 16, since we do not have a level 16 attribute because it's an epic gear piece, rather than increasing the stats of one of the existing substats, we will simply just unlock another one. And perhaps the best way to demonstrate this if you're still confused is by converting this gear piece from epic to legendary. So right now you can see that as an epic gear and at level 16, we only get 3 additional buffs, so +1, +2, +3. And when it becomes a legendary gear, we get an additional substat buff. So just to continue showing the trend, if we go on to an elite gear piece now, you can see that we only have 2 substats that we start with, which means that for the first 4 levels, we will get a substat buff. For the next 4 levels, we will still get a substat buff, but the remaining 8 levels, which is 4 + 4, we will not be getting any additional substat buffs, but simply be unlocking the remaining substats of the gear. So at level 12, we will simply unlock this substat, and at level 16, we will simply unlock the final substat. And let's just go through one very last example. So let's go back to a common gear. So let's go to a common gear. You can see that right now it has no sub-attributes unlocked so far. And if you can take a guess in what will happen as we level up from 0 to 16, what you should be expecting is that we will unlock all these substats, but we will not get any substat bonuses. So there's no +1, there's nothing. We only get the base stats. So of course, in the ideal situation, you want 6-star legendary gear pieces. but if you have to prioritize one, you definitely want to focus on the star level of gears before the rarity. So I would say once you have reached the middle game or perhaps the end of the early game, you should, as far as possible, be using 6-star gear pieces. And I would say that the minimum requirement for putting the minimum standard of a gear piece that you should be willing to use up once you're past the early game and once you're able to farm dungeons would be 6-star elite gear pieces. Anything less than this is quite weak, and in the long term, it's unlikely that you will be using this on your characters. So one thing I forgot to mention and I decided to add is actually that even though you may have gears which are of the same star level, for example 6 stars, the individual values of the substats can vary. So for instance, for speed, at 6 stars, this substat initial value can range from 35 to 25. So you can see for this piece, for instance, I have speed at 32, and I also have pieces which speed is only at 26. So this is important because the initial value of your substat will affect the subsequent values of your substat as you get the buffs from leveling your gear. So for instance, your speed +1, +2 and so on is reliant on the value of your initial substat. So what I mean by this is, if you can find some gears which are relevant to the situation, you can see that I have this speed +3 and the value of that is 98. And compared to this piece, I have speed +2 and the value is actually higher at 99. So let's just compare these two pieces more easily. So let's take a look here. Like this. Okay, I can't show both at once, but as you can see once again, even though this gear piece is at +3, the total value is only 98, whereas this gear piece at +2 speed has a total value of 99. So this happens because the initial base speed of this gear piece was quite a bit higher than the initial gear piece of the initial speed value of this piece. So what I mean by that is, before getting the +3, when this gear was at level 0, the speed value for this was maybe 25 or 26 on the lower end, whereas the value of the initial speed for this gear was maybe closer to 34 or 35 at the higher end. So this really shows that the initial value of each substat value also does play quite a significant part, and it's something you need to consider as well when choosing which gears to level up. So generally at my stage of the game, I do try and level up gears. For when I'm focusing speed, for instance, I do try and focus on leveling gears which are only about 32 speed and above, and this really does make a big difference when it comes to getting high speed rolls for gears. So another one is this. You can see that at speed +4 I have 149. This is actually pretty nice, and I think I do have another gear piece over here where it's also speed +4, but it's 166. So this once again is also had a much higher initial substat value, and this is something worth taking note when deciding and comparing between gears which one you should be leveling. So let's also talk about mythic gears. So mythic gears can only be upgraded from 6-star legendary gear pieces, as you can see here. So if you do not have a 6-star legendary gear piece, it can not, under any circumstances, become a mythic gear piece. So mythic gear pieces requires mythic scales, and if you can take a look here, mythic scales are fairly rare to obtain. And what happens when you do obtain a mythic scale is it will increase the value of your main stat after you level it from 16 to 20, and will also give you one additional substat buff. So if you can find a decent piece of gear to upgrade, and maybe let's just upgrade these boots actually aren't very good. I don't actually have any good pieces of gear to upgrade right now. Okay, so this one's decent because it gives a good amount of effect hit. So let's upgrade this 6-star legendary gear piece to mythic, and as I said, it will consume one mythic scale. So upon using the dragon scale, you can now upgrade our gear piece from level 16 to 20. And you can notice that when I upgrade this gear, the main stat, which is HP in this case, will increase. And the second thing that you need to notice is that when we upgrade it to 20, we will get another +1 buff. So right now we have a total of +4 in terms of substat buffs. And when we level it to 20, not only does our HP increase, but our substat has increased by 1 as well. So just now we had a total of +4, and now after leveling it to 20, we have a total of +5. And I did actually get pretty lucky by getting this +4 effect hit, so this is very nice to have. And this is also where I should mention that every time you do get a substat buff from leveling your gear, the substat that gets buffed is random, which means that on average you will be just getting +1 on every piece of gear, and of course that's generally not ideal. You want to get hopefully lucky and roll on a certain stat that you want, so there is a lot of luck involved in terms of leveling gear and getting good pieces of gears with good substat rolls. So you can see that there are instances where, well, perhaps not on some of my stronger characters because I would put my better gear there, but for example, if we take a look at this artifact, I definitely do not want this HP on this artifact, but unfortunately that's just what the game gave me as I leveled up my gear. And sometimes you can also get lucky. You can see I have a attack rate +5, which is perfect for Lance who really wants to have a lot of attack, and of course the mastery main stat, which is important. So there's a lot of luck involved when it comes to getting good gears. And now let's talk about choosing the correct gear sets for your characters. And it's quite difficult for me to give an overarching solution because it is a very situational thing based on the character. But generally for your damage dealers, so in my case, I have characters like Irato, I have Lance, Marie, and Giselle, who's support tech but is primarily or does also do a lot of damage. You do want to have devouring set on them, and there is a balance that must be made. So simply having a devouring set on your characters or whatever best attack related set that you have on your characters may not necessarily be better than having a equipment set which has worse effects but better substats. So it's difficult for me to properly identify where this trade-off happens, so you need to do some testing on your own. So if I wasn't clear, what I meant by this is that, as you can see in this scenario, I have, or rather what is optimal for Giselle would simply be 4 pieces of devouring set. However, you can notice that what I have for my Giselle is only 2 pieces of devouring set and 2 pieces of bone erosion set. So the reason for this is that even though I do have many different equipment pieces for my devouring set, and I could very easily put a chestplate piece and a accessory piece of devouring set on my Giselle, the pieces that I have are not necessarily good enough in terms of the stats that I want to be put on her. So you can see that what I currently have on my Giselle is pretty decent. So I have a mastery +3 here, and for this one I also have a mastery +3 and attack rate +1. And if I were to put a devouring set on her instead, for example this piece, it doesn't really benefit Giselle in any way because she doesn't really need any of these stats. And similarly with the accessory, I may not have a gear piece which is also something that I want that much on my Giselle. So you always need to look beyond the gear set itself, but also look at the substats that are available for each gear piece. So using gears for the gear set is not necessarily better than using gears for the substats. So you just need to try different things and see your overall stats and decide from there what is the best option for you. And as for what gears you should be putting on your respective characters, I'll just go through a very brief and not fully extensive example. So for damage dealers, like I said, generally you do want to have devouring set on your characters, and alternatives would be bone erosion set or your fast killing set for direct damage characters. And these are fairly late game sets, so other options would be things like penetration set, which gives mastery and attack, which is very useful. And generally you are just looking for gear pieces which give mastery or attack for the most part. So for HP burners, there's an exception in which you don't want attack, you actually want HP and mastery. So you can see I am still running an endurance set, which gives the stats that I've just mentioned for your HP burner characters, and still, if possible, you do want to run a full devouring set on them. But as you can see in this case, I am making the trade-off where using these two gear pieces is probably better than using a full devouring set of gears. Or maybe I just simply want to use the good devouring set pieces that I have on other characters instead. So there's always a balance to be made. As for your supporting characters, so let's take a look at Nordak for example. You do want HP and speed on your shielders, and if you want to see what stats your characters need, you can always look at the info page. And in this case, they recommend defense for Nordak because it does help his damage a little, but for the most part, you do just want HP and speed. And most of the time, you should mainly be focusing on speed as the priority rather than the HP, which is why you can see that I'm running 4 pieces of speed related gears here. So I'm running one simply speed set and one feather set, which gives both HP and speed. So you do want to maximize as much speed as possible on your supports. Of course, there will eventually, as I've said several times already, be a trade-off that you have to make. Maybe you are better off getting 100,000 extra health in exchange for 30 speed. So this is just a judgment call that you will have to make based on your situation. So another example we have is our Apsara over here. So you can see that she needs both HP and speed as well, and I have her pretty decently built. So once again, I'm using half feather set and half speed set. So what you'll notice is that I am using speed set on actually quite a lot of my characters. And maybe for one, to show how what gear sets you use may differ in characters, so we have Nicolith, and Nicolith wants a lot of speed and HP, but more importantly, she wants a lot of tenacity. So her tenacity is very important because her passive scales on the amount of tenacity that she has. And for that reason, you can see that I'm using these two gear sets, which are the Firm Wind set and the Tough set, each of which give 20% tenacity. So you might choose some unorthodox gear sets in order to meet certain stat requirements that you have. And lastly, let's talk about artifacts, and I've saved this for last because artifacts are universal across different characters. And what I mean by that is that generally you are using the same few pieces of equipment rather than lots of different gear sets you have here. So the main thing you need to concern yourself about with the artifacts are the main stats. So main stats are really important for your artifacts because it contributes a lot towards your character's build. So on your DOT damage dealers, you do want mastery main stat most of the time. And for your direct damage dealers, you do want either crit rate or crit damage. So eventually I will probably want to change this to crit damage, but for now I'm using crit rate. And besides that, there are some characters which use something like HP, so maybe, yeah, you can see my Nicolith has a HP main stat. And of course, there still should be a focus on your substats, so for instance on Nicolith I do need something like speed. And generally, for your Artifact 5, I think this is the most important one I should mention, you pretty much always just want speed on your Artifact 5 because speed is king in this game and the most important stat on basically any character you have. And your boot equipments and your Artifact 5 are some of the easiest to get and also larger sources of speed. So you can see that with just legendary equipment, you can get a total of 432 speed from your Artifact 5 and your boots alone. And if you bring these gears to mythic level, you can see that this value actually increases by quite a decent amount. So this will increase to about 576, if my math is correct, 576 speed in total, which is a very, very significant amount. And this is also the reason why most people recommend that you make your boots and your Artifact 5 mythic gear pieces before anything else. So yeah, this was a really quick summary for how gears work. I think the most important part for new players is the difference between your star levels and your equipment rarity. I think that's a very important thing that you should take away from this video if you're new. And besides that, it is, as I said, it is difficult to give extremely specific details on what gears you should use because there is a lot of luck involved when it comes to the substats and the rolls you get. And like I said, there will always be some form of trade-off that you have to make when it comes to gearing your characters. So of course, if you need more specific help, you can feel free to ask me in the comments or in the Infinite Magicraid Discord, and I'll be very happy to help you there. But for now, that's all I have, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.